The
The moment
planet
is upon
Kepler
us. We cannot falter.
442b
Understood. We
was
are ready.
beautiful.
What are your orders?
Hold the
Green
line,
forests
no matter the
covered
cost.
the land. Blue oceans sparkled under twin suns. Humanity had built a city here called New Geneva. It was meant to be a place of peace. A place where humans and aliens could learn to live together. New Geneva was home to 50,000 humans. Among them were 847 children. These children attended a special school called Horizon Academy. The school was famous across the galaxy. Human children and alien children studied together there. They learned each other's languages. They played each other's games. The idea was simple. If children grew up as friends, their species would never go to war. The Galactic Concordat was an alliance of 12 alien species. They had traveled the stars for thousands of years before humans arrived. When humanity burst onto the galactic stage, the aliens were surprised. Humans spread fast. They built colonies on hundreds of worlds in just 2 centuries. They traded with everyone. They made friends easily. Most species liked them, but not all. The Vethkai were insect-like creatures. They stood on 6 legs and had hard shells covering their bodies. Their eyes were black and empty. They had joined the Concordat only 50 years ago. Their economy was weak. Their military was small. They watched humanity grow powerful while they stayed poor. High Chitin Vraxis was the leader of the Vethkai. He hated humans. He hated their smiles. He hated their soft skin and their loud laughter. Most of all, he hated how the other species seemed to love them. At every Concordat meeting, humans got what they wanted. Trade deals went their way. New colonies were approved for them. The Vethkai got nothing. Vraxis decided to change this. He would teach the humans a lesson. He would show the galaxy that humans were weak, that they could be broken. He chose the children. The attack came on a bright morning. 3 Vethkai transport ships landed at New Geneva. They carried 200 soldiers, hidden inside cargo containers. The ships had papers, saying they were part of a cultural exchange program. The humans welcomed them. At exactly noon, the Vethkai soldiers emerged. They moved fast on their 6 legs. They carried weapons that fired bolts of green energy. They killed the guards at Horizon Academy in seconds. Then they stormed inside. The children were eating lunch when the doors exploded. Teachers tried to protect their students. They died first. The Vethkai rounded up every child they could find. Human children, alien children too, but those they released. They only wanted the humans. Within 1 hour, the Vethkai controlled the academy. They had 847 human children as hostages. The message was simple. Humanity must give the Vethkai half of their colony worlds. Humanity must pay tribute every year. Humanity must accept Vethkai rule over this sector of space. If they refused, the children would die. The human government received the message. They asked for time to discuss. They asked for proof that the children were alive. They tried to negotiate. The Vethkai responded by executing 23 children. They broadcast the execution across every channel in the Concordat. They wanted everyone to see. They wanted to show that they were serious. They wanted to break human spirit. The footage showed the children lined up against a wall. They were crying. Some called for their parents. Some held hands with their friends. The Vethkai soldiers raised their weapons. Green light flashed. The children fell. Across human space, billions watched. Parents saw children who looked like their own sons and daughters. Grandparents remembered when their grandchildren were that small. Soldiers thought of the families they had sworn to protect. Everyone watched. Everyone saw. And something changed in humanity that day. Admiral Helena Vasquez was aboard her flagship, the UNS Prometheus, when the footage arrived. She was a woman of 60 years. Her hair was gray. Her face was lined with age. She had fought in 3 wars and won them all. She had seen terrible things in her life. But she had never seen anything like this. The bridge crew watched in silence. Some cried. Some shook with anger. One young officer vomited. Vasquez watched without moving. Her face showed nothing, but her hands gripped her chair so hard that her knuckles turned white. When the footage ended, no one spoke. They waited for their admiral to say something, to give them direction, to tell them what to do. Vasquez stood slowly. She looked at her crew. These were good people. They followed rules. They obeyed laws. They believed in justice and proportional response, and all the things civilization required. She was about to ask them to forget all of it. "Get me strategic command," she said. Her voice was calm. Too calm. All of it. Every admiral, every general, every commander. I want them on a call in 1 hour. Her first officer stepped forward. "Admiral, what are we going to do?" Vasquez turned to look at the main screen. The frozen image showed a Vethkai soldier standing over the bodies of children. She stared at it for a long moment. "We are going to find every Vethkai in this galaxy," she said, "and we are going to make them wish they had never been born." The first officer swallowed hard. "The Concordat will object. They will call it disproportionate. They will try to stop us." "Let them try." "Admiral, there are billions of Vethkai. We cannot possibly—" "Cannot?" Vasquez turned to face him. Her eyes were cold, dead. He had seen those eyes on soldiers who had lost too much, soldiers who no longer cared about living. They murdered children, human children, on camera to scare us. She walked toward the door. "They made a mistake. They thought we would be afraid. They thought we would give them what they wanted to save the rest. They thought wrong." She stopped at the door and looked back at her crew. The Vethkai wanted to teach humanity a lesson about fear, but they are about to learn something that every species in this galaxy will remember for 1,000 years. "What is that, Admiral?" the first officer asked. Vasquez smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "You do not touch our children. Ever. For any reason. Because if you do, we will not stop until your entire species is nothing but a memory and a warning to others." The door closed behind her. Across human space, ships began to move. Factories switched from civilian production to weapons. Retired soldiers reported for duty. Governments that had argued for centuries came together in hours. Humanity was going to war. And this time, there would be no mercy. The Galactic Concordat met 3 days after the attack. The Great Hall on Station Prime was filled with representatives from 12 species. They sat in a circle, each delegation in their own section. Lights floated above them, translating every word into every language. The mood was tense. Everyone had seen the footage. Everyone knew what the Vethkai had done. But they also knew what humanity was capable of. And that scared them more. Ambassador Crix of the Tholani spoke first. His species looked like tall birds with 4 wings. They were known for their wisdom and their love of peace. "We must remain calm," he said. "The actions of the Vethkai were terrible. We condemn them fully, but we cannot allow this to become a war of extinction." Other species agreed. The Morveth, creatures of living crystal, spoke of economic sanctions. The Yulani, a race of amphibians, suggested cutting off Vethkai trade routes. The Drethkar, large beings covered in thick fur, proposed a peacekeeping force to rescue the remaining children. Everyone had ideas. Everyone wanted to help. But everyone also wanted humanity to stay calm, to be reasonable, to follow the rules. Director Samuel Okonkwo was the human ambassador to the Concordat. He was a tall man with dark skin and gray hair. He had served as a diplomat for 40 years. He believed in peace. He believed in working together. He believed that every problem could be solved with words. Until now. He listened to every species speak. He heard their concerns. He understood their fear. When they finished, he stood up slowly. The hall fell silent. "Thank you all for your words," he said. His voice was steady. "You have offered many good suggestions. Sanctions, trade restrictions, peacekeeping forces. These are the tools of civilization. These are the ways that reasonable species solve problems." His eyes moved across the room, looking at each delegation. "But you are making a mistake," All of you. You think this is a political problem. You think this can be solved with meetings and agreements and careful diplomacy. He shook his head. It cannot. The Thalani ambassador raised a wing. Director Okonkwo, please. We understand your anger. But surely you see that total war would destabilize the entire quadrant. The economic damage alone. 23 children, Okonkwo said. That is not a number. Those were sons and daughters. They had names, they had families, they had futures that will never happen now. We understand, said Ambassador Kurix. Truly, we do. But the Vethkai are a young species. They made a terrible error in judgment. Surely there is a path that does not involve. They broadcast the execution across the galaxy. Okonkwo's voice was harder now. They lined up children against a wall and shot them while the galaxy watched. This was not an error in judgment. This was a message. They wanted everyone to see that human children could be killed to force us to obey. He reached into his coat and pulled out a document. I am invoking Article 7 of the Concordat Charter. Humanity will respond to this attack as we see fit. We do not require permission. We do not seek approval. We are informing you as a courtesy. The hall erupted in noise. Species shouted over each other. Some demanded that he reconsider. Others warned of consequences. The Vethkai delegation, sitting in a far corner, looked nervous for the first time. Okonkwo waited for the noise to die down. Then he spoke again. I want you all to understand something. Every species in this room has rules about harming children. Every species protects its young. But for humans, it is different. We do not just protect our children. We define ourselves by how we protect our children. He looked at the Vethkai delegation. High Chiton Vraxis sat among them, his black eyes showing nothing. You chose to threaten what we love most. You thought this would make us weak. You thought we would give you what you wanted, to save the rest. But you misunderstood us completely. Vraxis spoke for the first time. His voice was clicking and harsh. Humans are soft. You care too much about rules, about fairness, about what others think. You will negotiate. You always do. Okonkwo smiled. It was a cold smile. You watched our entertainment programs. You read our news. You saw us arguing and debating and disagreeing, and you thought that was weakness. He shook his head. It was not weakness. It was luxury. We could afford to argue because nothing truly threatened us. But when our children are in danger, when our families are at risk, we stop arguing. We stop following rules. He leaned forward. Do you know what humans did to enemies who harmed their children throughout our history? We hunted them across continents. We burned their cities. We salted their fields so nothing would ever grow again. We erased them so completely that only their names survived as warnings. That was long ago, Vraxis said. You have evolved beyond such barbarism. No, Okonkwo said. We simply had no reason to show that side of ourselves. Until now. He turned back to the Concordat. In the next few days, you will see things that disturb you. You will see humanity act in ways you did not think possible. You will want to intervene. You will want to stop us. I advise against this. Ambassador Crick stood. His feathers were ruffled with distress. Director, please. I have studied humanity for 200 years. Your literature, your history, your philosophy. I know you are capable of great compassion. Do not let this tragedy turn you into something else. Okonkwo looked at the old bird alien. His expression softened, just for a moment. You studied us well, old friend, but you missed the most important lesson. Our compassion comes from strength. Our mercy comes from choice. We are kind because we choose to be kind. But when someone hurts our children, he gathered his documents and walked toward the door. We choose differently. The door closed behind him. The hall was silent. Finally, Ambassador Kurix spoke. His voice was old and tired. I have lived for 300 years. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have watched species destroy themselves in foolish wars. But I have never been more afraid than I am right now. The Morvith ambassador asked why. Carix turned to look at the Vethkai delegation. Vraxis sat there, still confident, still certain that humanity would not dare to act. Because, Carix said, the Vethkai still do not understand what they have done. They kicked a sleeping giant. They poked a dragon. They thought humans were like us, reasonable, measured, careful. He shook his ancient head. They were wrong. And by the time they realize their mistake, it will be far too late. The Vethkai had a good military. 300 warships protected their space. 2 million soldiers stood ready to fight. They had fought border wars before and won. High Chitin Vraxis believed his people could hold against any human attack. He was wrong. The human fleet arrived at Vethkai space 7 days after the massacre. Vraxis expected maybe 500 ships. The humans usually sent small, targeted forces. They liked surgical strikes, clean operations, minimal damage. 12,000 ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at once. The Vethkai sensors went crazy. Officers shouted in confusion. They had never seen so many ships in one place. Battleships, carriers, destroyers, support vessels. The human fleet stretched across millions of kilometers of space. It blotted out the stars. Admiral Helena Vasquez sat on the bridge of the Prometheus. Her fleet surrounded Vethkai Prime, the enemy homeworld. She opened a communication channel that every Vethkai could hear. "This is Admiral Vasquez of the United Human Fleet," she said. Her voice was calm and clear. "You have 6 hours to release every human child unharmed. For every hour after that deadline, I will destroy one of your colony worlds. This is not a negotiation. This is not a threat. This is a promise." The Vethkai High Council met in emergency session. They screamed at each other. Some wanted to surrender immediately. Others wanted to fight. Vraxis demanded that they hold firm. The humans were bluffing, he said. They would never actually destroy civilian targets. The 6 hours passed. The children were not released. Admiral Vasquez gave a single order: Glass Tertius. Vethkai Tertius was a mining colony. 2 million Vethkai lived there. They were workers and families. They had nothing to do with the attack on New Geneva. They were innocent. None of that mattered. The human fleet turned its weapons on the planet. Energy beams struck the surface. Nuclear warheads fell from orbit. The planet's crust cracked and melted. Oceans boiled away. The atmosphere burned. Within 1 hour, Vethkai Tertius was a dead world. Nothing survived. Not the buildings, not the people, not even the bacteria in the soil. 2 million Vethkai died. The galaxy watched in horror. The Concordat sent urgent messages demanding that humanity stop. Vasquez did not respond. She simply sent another message to Vethkai Prime. 5 hours until the next one. Now the Vethkai understood. Now they believed. Vraxis ordered the remaining children brought to a public square where human sensors could see them. He threatened to kill them all if the attack continued. Vasquez smiled when she heard this. "He thinks the children are shields," she told her officers. "He still does not understand." While the fleets faced each other in space, a small ship slipped past the Vethkai defenses. It was completely invisible to sensors. It carried 20 humans in black armor. They called themselves the Furies. Captain Marcus Chen led the team. He was a quiet man. He did not smile often. He did not talk much about his work. But he was very, very good at what he did. The Furies landed in the city surrounding the academy. They moved through the streets like ghosts. Vethkai patrols walked past them without seeing anything. The humans had technology that no species in the Concordat had ever seen. Personal shields that bent light around them, weapons that made no sound, computers that could hack any system in seconds. They reached the square where the children were held. 200 Vethkai soldiers guarded them. The children sat in groups, surrounded by armed aliens. Some were crying, some were too exhausted to cry anymore. They had been hostages for 10 days now. Chen studied the situation. His team was outnumbered 10-1. In a normal fight, they would lose. But this would not be a normal fight. All units, he said quietly. Weapons free, leave nothing alive. The Furies attacked. It was over in 90 seconds. The Vethkai soldiers died before they understood what was happening. Silent weapons cut them down. Human soldiers appeared from nowhere, striking with perfect accuracy. Any Vethkai who raised a weapon was dead before they could fire. Any who tried to run was dead before they took 3 steps. Chen walked through the aftermath. His boots stepped over fallen Vethkai. He reached the children and knelt down. A young girl, maybe 7 years old, looked up at him with wide eyes. "Are you here to save us?" she asked. "Yes," Chen said. His voice was gentle. "It is over. You are going home." Chen picked her up and carried her toward the evacuation shuttle. Other soldiers gathered the remaining children. 824. That was how many survived. As the shuttle lifted off, one of the children asked Chen a question. A small boy, still shaking with fear. "Are the bad bugs going to hurt anyone else?" Chen looked down at the boy. He thought about the 23 children who had died. He thought about their parents, who would never hold them again. He thought about the footage that had played across the galaxy. "No," he said, "they will never hurt anyone again." The shuttle escaped Vethkai Prime and reached the human fleet. Admiral Vasquez received word that all surviving children were safe. She closed her eyes for a moment. A single tear ran down her cheek. Then she opened her eyes. They were hard again. Cold. "The children are safe," she announced to her fleet. "Our primary mission is complete." Her first officer looked at her. "Admiral, what are your orders?" Vasquez looked at the image of Vethkai Prime on her screen. Billions of beings lived on that world. Most of them had nothing to do with the attack. Most of them were probably horrified by what their leaders had done. It did not matter. "Begin the second phase," she said. "Total subjugation of all Vethkai territory. No exceptions, no mercy, no negotiation." "Admiral," her first officer said quietly, "the children are safe. We could stop now. We could." "Could what?" Vasquez turned to face him. "Let them rebuild? Let them forget? Let them do this again in 100 years to someone else's children?" She shook her head. "No. Every species in this galaxy will watch what happens next. They will see exactly what the cost is for harming human children. And they will never, ever forget." She turned back to the screen. "Advance." 12,000 human warships moved forward. Behind them, Vethkai Tertius still glowed with radiation. A dead monument to a dead species. Because the Vethkai were not dead yet. But they would be. Humanity would make certain of that. The galaxy had wanted to know what humans would do when their children were threatened. Now they would find out. The war lasted 3 months. That was all the time humanity needed to destroy an empire. The Vethkai had 47 colony worlds. The humans came for all of them. They did not stop. They did not rest. They did not listen to pleas for peace. World after world fell to the human advance. The pattern was always the same. Human ships would arrive in orbit. They would broadcast a single message. "Surrender now. Go to the designated areas. You will be relocated. Resistance will result in death." Some colonies surrendered immediately. These were the lucky ones. Human soldiers would land and round up the population. The Vethkai were loaded onto transport ships and taken to special prison worlds. They were fed and housed, but they were prisoners. They would remain prisoners forever. Other colonies tried to fight. These colonies ceased to exist. Human weapons erased them from the map. Cities that had stood for centuries became craters. Forests that had grown for thousands of years became ash. Nothing survived human anger. The Galactic Concordat watched in shock. They had known humans for 200 years. They had seen humans as friendly creatures, eager to trade, quick to forgive, slow to anger. The aliens had thought humans were soft. They were learning how wrong they had been. 3 Concordat species decided to intervene. The Tholani, the Morveth, and the Drethkar sent a combined fleet to Vethkai space. Their mission was to create a buffer zone between human forces and the remaining Vethkai worlds. They hoped their presence would force humanity to negotiate. Admiral Vasquez met them at the border of Vethkai space. 600 allied ships faced 12,000 human vessels. The alien fleet looked small and fragile against the wall of human warships. Ambassador Crix was aboard the Tholani flagship. He opened a communication channel to the Prometheus. "Admiral Vasquez," he said, "please, we beg you to stop this. The Vethkai are broken. They cannot threaten you anymore. Show mercy. Be the humans we knew and admired." Vasquez appeared on his screen. She looked tired. Her eyes were red. She had not slept more than a few hours in weeks, but her voice was steady. "Ambassador Crix, I respect you. I know you mean well, but I am asking you to leave. Now." "We cannot," Crix said. "If we allow this genocide to continue, we become part of it. Our conscience demands that we stand against it." "Your conscience will get your people killed." Crix spread his wings sadly. "Then, so be it. We will not move." There was a long silence. Vasquez looked at the old bird alien on her screen. She remembered meeting him years ago, when humanity first joined the Concordat. He had been kind to the human delegates. He had helped them understand alien customs. He had been a friend. "Ambassador," she said quietly, "you have children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren." "I do." "What would you do if someone killed them? Not in war, not by accident, but deliberately, on camera, to send a message?" Crix did not answer. "You would do exactly what we are doing," Vasquez said. "Every species in this galaxy would. The only difference is that we have the power to actually do it, and we will." "There must be limits," Crix said, "even to vengeance, even to justice." "There were limits. They killed our children anyway." Vasquez leaned forward. "Ambassador, I will not fire on your ships. I do not want to hurt your people. But if you do not move, I will go around you. I will go through you if I must. Nothing will stop us from finishing what the Vethkai started." Crix looked at her for a long moment. Then he turned to his officers. "All ships, stand down. Move aside." "Ambassador," one of his captains protested, We cannot stop them," Crix said. His voice was heavy with sorrow. "If we try, they will destroy us, and continue anyway. All we can do now is witness, and remember." The Allied fleet moved aside. The human ships passed through without slowing. On the Concordat station, the other species watched the events unfold. They saw world after world fall. They saw the Vethkai population shrink from billions to millions to thousands. They saw an entire civilization being erased. The Morveth ambassador, a being of living crystal, asked a question that no one could answer. "What have the Vethkai created? The humans we knew are gone. Something else has taken their place." "No," said an old Qatari who had been silent for days. "The humans we knew were always this. We simply never gave them a reason to show it." On Vethkai Prime, High Chitin Vraxis finally understood his mistake. He watched from his palace as human ships filled the sky. He watched as his military was destroyed in hours. He watched as human soldiers marched through his streets, rounding up his people like animals. He tried to surrender. He offered everything: territory, resources, his own life. Director Okonkwo received his message and sent a reply. "You executed human children on a broadcast to show the galaxy that we could be controlled through fear. You made our children into a weapon against us. So now we will make your entire species into a weapon for us. A weapon that teaches the galaxy what happens to those who threaten what we love." "What will happen to my people?" Vraxis asked. "Your people will live. In camps, on prison worlds, under human guard. They will be fed. They will be housed. They will not be tortured or abused. But they will never be free again. They will never build ships again. They will never leave the worlds we assign them. And every year, representatives from every species in the Concordat will visit those worlds. They will see your people. They will remember why they are there. For how long? Forever. Vraxis was silent for a long time. Then he asked one more question. Why? The children are safe now. You have destroyed our military. You have taken our colonies. You have defeated us completely. Why not simply leave us as a broken species? Why do this? Okonkwo's voice was cold. Because broken species can heal. Humiliated species can rise again. Your grandchildren might have forgotten this lesson. Your great-grandchildren might have tried again. We will not give you that chance. This is not justice, Vraxis said. This is cruelty. No, Okonkwo said. This is a message, and the galaxy will hear it loud and clear. Touch human children, and your species has no future. None. Ever. That is the lesson. You are simply the example. The communication ended. Vraxis stood alone in his palace as human soldiers approached. He had thought humans were weak. He had thought their love for their children made them easy to control. He had thought he was clever. He had been very, very wrong. The galaxy changed in many ways during those years. New trade routes opened. Old alliances shifted. Species rose and fell in power. Technology advanced. Life continued. But one thing remained constant. One lesson was never forgotten. Do not harm human children. On Vethkai Prime, the cities were empty. The buildings still stood, but no one lived in them. The streets were silent. The factories were cold. The world that had once held 8 billion beings was now a monument, a memorial, a warning. The human government had made a decision. They would not destroy Vethkai Prime. Instead, they would preserve it. Every year, representatives from every species in the Concordat were required to visit. They would walk through the empty streets. They would see the abandoned homes. They would read the signs that explained what had happened here. And they would remember. The remaining Vethkai lived on 3 prison worlds at the edge of human space. There were about 2 million of them left. They were fed well. They had homes and schools and hospitals. They were not mistreated, but they were not free. They could never leave their worlds. They could never build ships. They could never forget why they were there. Human guards watched them constantly, not to punish them, just to remind them, and to remind everyone else who visited. General Marcus Chen stood on the surface of Vethkai Prime. He was an old man now. His hair was white. His face was lined with age, but his eyes were still sharp, still alert, still dangerous. He had brought a group of young cadets with him. They came from every species in the Concordat. Humans, Tholani, Morveth, Katari, even a young Drethkar who towered over the others. They were students at the Galactic Military Academy. They were the next generation of officers and diplomats. They needed to understand. This world was home to 8 billion Vethkai, Chen said as they walked through an empty street. Schools, hospitals, factories, families, all gone now. Not because of a natural disaster, not because of a plague, because their leaders made a choice. The cadets looked around at the empty buildings. Some of them had never seen a dead world before. The silence was heavy, oppressive. It felt wrong for a place to be so still. A young Thariac student raised a tentacle. She was small and purple, with large eyes that showed every emotion. Right now, those eyes showed confusion. General Chen, she said, I have studied this war in my classes. I understand that the Vethkai did something terrible, but the human response seems excessive. You killed billions for the deaths of 23. Chen stopped walking. He turned to face the young alien. His expression was calm, but there was something deep in his eyes, something old and cold. You are thinking like a mathematician, he said. 23 versus billions. The numbers do not balance. The response was not proportional. Was it not? The Thariaks asked. No, it was not meant to be proportional. It was meant to be absolute. He started walking again. The cadets followed. When I was a young officer, Chen continued, I believed in proportional response. I believed in rules of engagement. I believed that civilized species should always measure their reactions, match force with equal force, never escalate beyond what was necessary. He stopped at a building that had once been a school. Tiny chairs were still visible through the dusty windows. Then I watched the footage from New Geneva. I watched children being executed. I heard their voices calling for their parents. He was quiet for a moment. Something changed in me that day. Something changed in all of us. We stopped thinking about proportional response. We started thinking about making sure it never happened again. A young human cadet spoke up. But sir, wasn't there another way? Couldn't we have achieved the same result with less destruction? Perhaps, Chen admitted. We could have destroyed their military and left their civilians alone. We could have demanded reparations and accepted their surrender. We could have been merciful. He turned to face all the cadets. And in 100 years, some new Vethkai leader might have decided to try again. They might have thought that humanity had gone soft, that we had forgotten, that our love for our children was still a weakness that could be exploited. He gestured at the empty world around them. Now they cannot think that. Every species in this galaxy knows exactly what will happen if they harm human children. They know because the proof is standing right here. 8 billion graves, an entire civilization erased, not because we had to, because we chose to. The cadets were silent. The weight of his words pressed down on them. Finally, the young Thariak spoke again. General, may I ask you a question? Of course. You were there. You rescued the surviving children. You fought in this war. Do you ever feel guilt for what humanity did? Chen looked at her for a long moment. Then he shook his head. No, I do not feel guilt. I feel sadness. Sadness for the Vethkai who did nothing wrong, but paid the price anyway. Sadness for the soldiers who had to carry out these orders. Sadness for what we had to become to protect what we love. He started walking toward the memorial at the center of the city. The cadets followed. But guilt? No, because if we had shown mercy, if we had been proportional, if we had been civilized, some other species would have tried the same thing eventually. They would have looked at humanity and seen weakness. They would have threatened our children to control us. They reached the memorial. It was a simple wall of black stone. Carved into it were 23 names, the children who had died. Around the wall, the ground was covered in flowers and toys and small tributes left by human visitors. Now they look at humanity and see this, Chen said. They see a species that will burn down the galaxy for our children. They see a species that cannot be threatened through our love. They see a species that you do not want as an enemy. He placed his hand on the memorial wall. The 23 children who died here changed the galaxy forever. Not through their lives, but through their deaths. Because their deaths taught every species a simple lesson. He turned to face the cadets one final time. Human children are not weapons to be used against us. Human children are not hostages to guarantee good behavior. Human children are the one thing in this universe that we will protect at any cost at all. The young Thariaks looked at the memorial, then at the empty city, then at the old human general. Has any species threatened human children since? She asked. Chen smiled. It was a sad smile, but also a proud one. No, not once in 50 years. And you know what? I do not think any species ever will again. He looked up at the sky, where human ships patrolled in eternal vigilance. That is why we did what we did. That is why we became what we became. Not out of hatred, not out of cruelty, but out of love. Fierce, absolute, terrifying love. We wanted our children to be safe. Now they are. Forever. The wind blew through the empty streets of Vethkai Prime. The galaxy turned overhead. And somewhere, in a classroom, or a playground, or a home, human children laughed and played and grew up without fear. Because the galaxy had learned its lesson, and it would never forget.